Kings and queens, welcome to Faith Helps Podcast, and I am your host, Diamond Booth. And if you tuned in last week, thank you so much for returning. And if this is your first time here, welcome. You are in for a treat. If you haven't heard episode 1, I invite you to go check it out because I shared a lot about what you can expect from this podcast so you can determine whether or not this is the podcast for you. Just as a disclaimer, this podcast does not replace actual therapy. In no way does listening to this podcast mean that you are receiving therapy. And if you are experiencing a mental health emergency or safety concerns of any sort, please call 911. Now, if you or someone you know is experiencing financial disparities and they could use some mental health support, you can visit my nonprofit website, kingdom.com. There you will find pro bono and sliding scale mental health resources and services. Okay? Cool beans? Cool. All right. So, I mentioned go check out episode 1 if you haven't. You'll get a pretty good understanding of where I'm coming from when it comes to the topics that will be presented throughout this podcast. And today's topic, title of this episode is, drumroll, take territory. What comes to mind when you hear that? Take territory. You might envision some sort of militia strategically navigating across mountainous terrain to proudly stick a flag in the soil, asserting their ownership over the region or land. Or if you are a particularly spiritual person, you've likely heard some variation of this phrase before in reference to taking up space and authority from the enemy, or just stepping into your spiritual gifts and whatnot. Perhaps Genesis 1 comes to mind, specifically verse 28, where God gives us humans dominion over the earth and all its creatures. Dominion, meaning sovereignty or control, is essentially what I'm talking about when I say take territory now. So shout out to Transformation Church and Pastor Mike Todd. We got dominion. Hashtag designed for dominion. But no, for real. Okay. All right. I digress. The point is that taking territory is a part of our lives, whether you are spiritual or not. For example, when you buy that 600 square foot rental space for your nail tech services, sis, you just took up some territory. When you and your boys pull your money together to turn the abandoned liquor store into a barbershop, bruh, you just took up territory. If you are a teacher, your classroom is your territory. If you are a therapist or accountant, your office space or cubicle is your territory. Your place of work is your territory. And if we can go even deeper, you can take up territory in your home, your neighborhood. To be completely honest with you, there's no limit to the territory you can take. Why am I talking about this? To keep it 100 with you all, this topic was triggered by my own insecurities. Yeah, insecurities. To give context, a little over a year ago, I received feedback that I should transition my Instagram and YouTube pages and the videos that I was doing and the Write With Me sessions, for those of you who have been rocking with me since then. I was told to turn them all into a podcast. Yes, I said over a year ago I got that feedback, and yes, I am just now doing it. Stay out of my business. Just kidding. And here's why, though. This is why it took me so long. Because over the course of that year, I allowed the voice of my insecurities to be louder than the God in me. Everyone has a podcast. I can't count how many times I said that to myself. And I can't count how many times I gave it as an excuse, whether someone would ask me when I'm talking with them about a video I did, and they're like, yeah, you should really turn into podcasts. I'm like, oh. I kept giving the excuse, everyone has a podcast, whenever I got the feedback and whenever someone would ask me why I hadn't made the switch. I just kept saying it. Everyone had one. I felt like I would just be one more voice clogging up the social media airways as if there's some sort of traffic jam. I felt like I would just be one more person reaching for a mic, as if we don't have enough people doing that already. And despite what I felt in my heart and what people who have expressed appreciation for my content said, I still just couldn't seem to shake the thought of, but what if what I have to say is redundant or just isn't as important, or people won't be interested, or maybe people just won't want to hear it at all, or they just don't care. Sure, I know that I am called to help others in the realm of mental health and faith, but there are thousands of podcasts already doing that. Literally everyone has a podcast. I said it so many times, and that's probably why I'm saying it so much here now. Until one day in November of last year, God finally got sick and tired and sick of me dragging my feet. For a whole week, I felt this unrelenting pressure, mentally, spiritually, and physically in my chest to just get to work on this podcast. Literally waking me up in the night. And I recognized as God because I've grown the familiarity of how and when He speaks to me. Additionally, it seemed like everywhere I went, in every song, every video or show I watched, I just kept noticing this recurring message about time. And forget algorithm stuff. I know that plays a role, but this was different. It felt like God was reminding me that tomorrow is not promised, and that there are seasons, aka deadlines, to the things He has called or gifted us to do. When God drops something in your heart to do it when He says to. Of course, He extends grace and mercy, but at the end of the day, He will reassign it to the next qualified applicant. His word will not return to Him void. There are certain things we are called to do or gifted to do that are time sensitive. We'll revisit this for sure in another podcast, I'm sure. But as of right now, the point is, I want you to get the fact that time isn't promised. The point I want you to get is that whatever it is you have been putting off or postponing, just get started. Don't waste another day, not even another hour. Not a second, not another minute. I'm not going to sing. And certainly not a whole year like I did. Just don't waste the time. When God reminded me of this, it certainly shook me up a bit. I'd be lying if I said my anxiety and nerves didn't reach an all-time freaking high. They surely did. But I picked up what God was putting down. God didn't have time for me to keep playing this hopscotch, duck, goose, duck, and dodge games with Him. He said what He said. And I'm so thankful for the grace and patience He did have with me. I'm also grateful for the ultimatum He gave me. Yes, I said ultimatum. And that was either do it now or I'll find someone more obedient. He knew that was a low blow for me. I had been reiterating to others all 2023 that slow obedience is disobedience. I can't count how many times I said that. I'm sure you guys can. And I'm sure you can find it all over my Instagram. Slow obedience is disobedience. Oh, I'll never say that again. Yet here I was being exactly that, disobedient. Nevertheless, I finally got my act together. As one of my favorite podcasters / global mentors / creative / rapper / pastor / so many other titles and hats I could list off often says, do it scared. Gotta love Tim Ross. #dwellers. So with the importance of time, reminders of obedience, and an ultimatum ruminating in my mind, I started working. I started planning, I started preparing, I started researching, I started doing all these things to get ready and, work myself up to doing it, right? Problem solved, right? Bold and brave, 24/7, 365 right now, right? No. I still get anxious. I still get nervous. I still have moments of feeling unqualified. The thought of, but everyone is doing a podcast still comes up from time to time. And I'm still a God-loving, God-honoring, God-fearing woman. And I'm also human. And just like anyone else, I sometimes need reminders. And I'm sure sometimes you do too. So here's your reminder. God handcrafted you to take territory. Own that, baby girl. Own that, baby boy. That is something God said to me that motivates me even to this day to move and work past the anxiety, past the nerves, and past the insecurities. Yes, there are already podcasters talking about mental health and faith, but not in the way that I do, and not to the populations that I've been appointed to. Not to the audience that I've been called to. You know, the interesting thing about taking territory is the significance of that first word, take. Take means to lay hold of something, to remove someone or something from a particular place or person. I'd say from another's ownership. So let me ask you this. Who or what are you taking from? From a Christian perspective, the fact is that we are taking territory from the enemy. Taking not just territory, but we're also taking families, power, authority, and so much more. And this applies whether you're a Christian or not. There are some of you who need to be taking back your dignity, taking back your peace and sound mind, taking back control over your life, taking back your autonomy and independence, taking back responsibility. To take requires action, and that action can't come from no one else but you. No one is going to do it for you. No one can do it for you. You're going to have to do the work. Faith without works is dead work. You're going to have to put one foot in front of the other, literally and figuratively. You are a walking territory taker, guys. Like, say it. I am a walking territory taker. What am I talking about right now? I'm talking about you truly understanding the power and authority you are walking around with and not using. If you research the word territory, you'll see one of its definitions is an area defended by a team or a player. In this world, in your life, in your family, in your friend groups, in your community, in your job places, you are that player. Maybe jealousy has been taking territory in your friendships. Well, guess what? You are the one who has the power and authority to take the territory back and cultivate respect, love, compassion, and peace. Or maybe generational curses have been taking territory in your family. You are the player. You are the one who has wisdom and knowledge and strategy to take the territory back and enforce freedom, healing, and breakthrough, and love, and compassion, and grace. At work, chaos has maybe been running amok, invading every office space. Everyone is on edge and at each other's throats. Well, guess what? You are the player who has strategy and understanding to take territory back and establish order, clarity, and efficiency. It is you. Dissect the word a bit more, and you'll find that territory is also defined as an area in which one has certain rights or for which one has responsibility. In other words, you have a right and a responsibility to the places, spaces, people, and assignments God has appointed you to and placed in your life. Even further exploration of the word territory defines it as an area of knowledge, activity, or experience. Knowledge, activity, or experience. What are the areas of knowledge, aka insight, activity, aka expertise, and experience, aka skill, are you gifted in? And are you using them? Your gifts are your best tools, more effective than any weapon you could ever use. I think one exceptional example of using your gifts for taking territory is New Orleans' finest rapper, D1. That man takes up territory in classrooms by refining and inspiring the minds of the youth. He reaches them and he inspires them and motivates them through nurturing their education and still creating space for their individuality and their creativity. On social media platforms, he assertively and boldly, unapologetically, and unashamedly takes territory by holding his viewers and followers accountable for what they say, do, and listen to. I have no doubt he's changing the mindsets and behaviors of everyone that he comes in contact to. He is taking territory. And he is straight up snatching territory in the music industry by producing music that glorifies positivity, growth, and God instead of violence, mediocrity, and debauchery and foolishness that's tearing apart our Black and brown communities. He promotes peace and compassion and self-sacrifice, which is what the world today is so desperately in need of. Recently, he just released the Platinum Pledge. I encourage you guys to go over and check out his page and learn more about it. But D1 and any of the other amazing people I could sit here and name have significant and specific assignments, just like me and you, So again, I'm gonna ask you, what, who, where are you supposed to be taking territory? I want to answer. I want to see an answer in them comments. I realized God was so serious about me taking this assignment serious because while there are many podcasts on mental health and faith, there are still so many that aren't. There are billions of podcasts taking territory to promote drama and hate and vindictiveness and envy and insecurities and shame and misdirection and destruction and chaos and fear and confusion and anxiety. Like, it's crazy out here, the things that is allowed to be on TV and on media. That don't bother you? You listen to this podcast because you want to be a better you, and what you see doesn't bother you? You don't feel ignited to move? The enemy lives for these types of things, for our minds to be polluted with foolishness and hate and chaos and killing and destruction. He thrives on spreading fear and confusion, distractions to waste your time, and foolishness to occupy your mind. So it is necessary that I help take back that territory. It is necessary for you to too. What has God called you to do? What has He gifted you to do? What gifts are you using to magnify His kingdom versus the other? What territory has He appointed you to? Don't take this lightly. Like, get up and move. I am begging you, don't waste the time He's giving you because it's not promised. He chose you. He called you because you are the perfect person for the job. Maybe I'm going hard on this right now because just a transparent moment for me, not less than a week ago, literally on Monday, I find out, New Year's Day to be more specific, I find out about one of my previous students that I was working with getting shot 5 times. And he was young. And he had so much potential. He had so much promise. Time is not promised. You may not get tomorrow to write that book. You may not get next week to work on that business plan. You may not get next year to start that new business or that new idea that you've been working on and formulating and just allowing to float around in your mind. It's not promised. Get up and move. In the description of this podcast, real quick, in the description of this podcast, when you go to my main page, one of the things I stated was that you will not listen to this podcast and stay the same. Baby, I meant that. I said what I said, because if you are not feeling pricked in your spirits or built up in some way, then this podcast is meaningless. I want you guys to actually be encouraged, inspired, healed, and challenged. I'm going to say it again. I want you to be encouraged, inspired, healed, and challenged. It was in the promo video. It was in the trailer. Encouraged, inspired, healed, and challenged so that you can step fully into your best self. This is why I've included reflection questions and application questions throughout the podcast and in the captions to provoke you to think deeper, not just get inspired, but to be impacted and actually start making action steps to apply what you are listening to and what you're getting out of this. In episode 1, I set the precedent for the purpose, intentions, and goals of this podcast. I want you guys to really embrace working towards becoming your best self. And I feel like it's important to recognize what is becoming your best self. What is that? The answer is found in your relationship with God. How are you going to become the best you if you don't even know who you are supposed to be? The only way you find the answer to that question is to go back to the manufacturer. If your car starts having issues and breaking down and acting crazy, you take it back to the manufacturer, the one who designed it. You were not just created, baby boy, baby girl, you were designed. There's so much more to you than you could ever think, suspect, or could ever even imagine. And majority of people are not functioning at their optimal capacity because they refuse to go back to the manufacturer. I don't want you to be drawn to this podcast because of me. I don't want you guys to be drawn to my videos because of me. I don't want you to spend hours upon hours on social media and listening and whatnot, but not growing. If this podcast doesn't make you want to go, that's motion, and apply, that's intentional action, what you listen to, then don't listen. Don't. If this podcast doesn't make you want to seek God out for yourself and develop your own personal, intimate relationship with Him, then don't listen. Maybe I'm not the right cup of tea for you. Maybe you prefer Lipton. Maybe you prefer Twinings. And that's okay. Go get your Lipton. Go get your Twinings, sweetheart. Go ahead and add in some sugar and some honey. Do what you gotta do. Otherwise, continue listening so that we can change. Continue making steps towards actual transformation. I don't know where that came from, but that's where we're at. That's the energy I'm on as we're starting this podcast. And I hope you can match that energy. So until next time, my beautiful and handsome kings and queens, remember, you are a walking territory taker. And remember who you are. Time is not promised. Don't take it lightly. Walk in your authority and identity as you become your best self, as you take up territory or take back territory. And while you're on that journey of being that mighty, strong, powerful territory taker that I know you are, remember, a little faith helps. Bye, guys.